Rising fuel prices hitting many countries in Asia that import a significant amount of oil. Japan, South Korea and the Philippines are exploring lifting restrictions on coal-fired power plants to ease the energy crunch. Our correspondents in major cities in Asia give us their account of situations on the ground.
Drivers don't mind these long queues at Synergy that could take over 20 minutes. And that's because pump prices at this Singapore petrol station brand are lower than at some other stations. Petrol prices in Singapore have risen sharply over the past month, crossing the $3 per litre mark, levels last seen in 2022. And that was when global oil prices surged amid the Russia-Ukraine war. For some fuel grades, prices have climbed even further, depending on the brand and location. Now, diesel prices have also risen sharply, at times even exceeding 95-octane fuel, adding to cost pressures across the transport sector. The rise in prices tracks global oil markets as tensions in the Middle East raise concerns over possible supply disruptions. That uncertainty has contributed to higher prices, with fuel retailers in Singapore adjusting pump prices frequently. As a country that imports almost all of its fuel, Singapore is particularly exposed to these global shifts. In response to rising fuel costs, the labour movement and its affiliated associations say additional support is needed for taxi drivers and for platform workers. They are pushing for more, including fuel subsidies.
Malaysians are also feeling the heat from escalating tensions in the Middle East. Now, although the country is an oil and gas producer, 60% of its food supply are imported. Now, take, for example, chilies and shallots. Almost all are imported from Thailand and India, and they are indispensable and used in everyday cooking of the people. Now, to mitigate any possible supply disruptions, several ministries have tasked their employees and their staff to plant quick-yielding vegetables like chilies and onions. Now, for farmers and producers, meanwhile, many are also stockpiling as prices of fertilizers and animal feed are said to have gone through the roof. Now, this after their supply were affected by closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Now, all these are cascading through the food chains, driving up prices from vegetables to chicken and eggs.
Indonesia set aside about $22.5 billion in its annual budget this year for energy subsidies and to support state energy firms in keeping fuel and electricity affordable. That was based on assumption that crude prices average at $70 a barrel. But officials say subsidies remain sustainable despite the surge in oil prices due to the conflict in the Middle East. Instead, the government is seeking savings of $4.7 billion by boosting renewables, trimming ministry budgets, and introducing a work-from-home policy. In February, Indonesia ran a budget deficit of $8 billion, or 0.53% of GDP. Officials warned that it would be impossible to keep the deficit under the legal limit of 3% of GDP without cutting spending or slowing growth.
The Iran war has sparked petrol panic in many parts of Thailand. There have been long queues and empty pumps, especially outside of Bangkok, just as a price cap on diesel expired and spiked prices from about 90 US cents to more than $1 per litre. The government, however, is blaming hoarding for the shortages and is assuring Thailand still has 3 months of reserves left, with more on the way. Still, it can and won't intervene to stop fuel prices from rising. The impact on daily life here isn't visible per se, but it starts creeping up on people. Daily goods such as eggs and porks have already gotten more expensive. Even some crematoriums in Buddhist temples don't have enough fuel for funerals. Residents are advised to work from home more often and not to put the AC on full blast, despite this being the hottest time of the year. Tourism, still the country's major breadwinner, is also affected by this. There are less taxis picking up guests at the airport, less boats bringing them to the islands, and subsequently less money in the local businesses going around altogether. And with Songkran, the Thai New Year, around the corner next month, many here are asking whether they should leave the car behind and take the bus across the country or not go home at all.
South Korea is rolling out emergency energy-saving measures to respond to possible oil supply disruption caused by the Middle East crisis. Besides calling for the public to turn off lights and take shorter showers, this week it says it began enforcing a mandatory 5-day vehicle restriction system for public sector workers, limiting driving based on license plate numbers. Officials say the measure could affect around 1.5 million vehicles and save thousands of barrels of oil a day, as authorities brace for a prolonged energy crunch. Now, if the crisis drags on, authorities warn these restrictions could expand to all drivers nationwide, something not seen since the oil shock during the Gulf War in the 1990s. Fuel costs spiked after the latest crisis began, forcing the government to impose price controls on petrol. And while prices have since stabilized, calls for an end to the Iran war are growing here in South Korea, 1 month into the conflict, as geopolitical and economic risks grow.